Back to ThinkTech. It's Marco and me. Marco is in Phnom Penh. He joins us by Skype. Thank you so much, Marco Mangelsdorf from Provision Solar and Hilo, for joining us from Phnom Penh.
Well, greetings, Jay. Greetings. Wonderful to be with you. Just got in yesterday afternoon from Bangkok, so haven't really got my arms or feet wrapped around the city of Phnom Penh quite yet, but that's what the rest of the day is for.
Aloha. My name is Josh Green. I'm a senator.
So, Marco, you've been out of town, but
Hi,
that doesn't mean everything stopped while you were gone. In fact, you had a narrow miss in Kathmandu. Can you talk about it?
Yes, indeed, Jay. My heart just really goes out to the thousands of people who have lost their lives, the tens of thousands who have had loved ones taken from them, and folks who are in hospitals by the thousands, and then the millions, literally millions of people in the mountainous country of Nepal, which is scrunched between two giants to the north of China and then to the south of India. And I was in Kathmandu last week and was scheduled to fly out on Friday the 24th. My plane took off about 2 p.m. And then the following day, a little bit before noon, on the 25th, was at 7 point.
What devastation. So many thousands of people killed, and there'll be more who won't be able to survive in the ruins. Help won't be able to get there fast enough. And, it's a sort of a sign of the times. Somehow the Earth is unhappy with us. This was a huge earthquake. And you wonder how much we know about and how much we're going to learn from the rescue efforts now about how to deal with disasters of this magnitude. But certainly we're not done with it, and this is a century already that's rolling itself out to be a dangerous century. But let's not dwell on that. You were lucky. And so where are you now? You're in Phnom Penh, or was it Bangkok? Oh. Okay, we're going to go to a commercial. We'll be right back after we can reconnect with Marco Mangelsdorf.
Inspired by an ancient culture, classical Chinese dance, vigorous physicality, timeless stories, 5,000 years of Chinese music and dance. Shen Yun presents authentic Chinese culture. Coming to Blaisdell Concert Hall, May 8th and 9th. Tickets at shenyun.com or call 808-792-3919.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia, and by Asia we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live with Marco Mangelsdorf. He joins us by Skype in Phnom Penh. So you were saying, Marco, about the fact that we live in a time when these disasters, such as the earthquake in Kathmandu, seem to be coming more quickly somehow. And in a century of climate change, it's not just earthquakes that we should worry about.
I don't know. You can. It's more, of course, possible to make a case that extreme weather, hurricanes, and so forth are more a effect from the cause of global warming and so forth. But earthquakes, I think, are in a different category. I mean, there's been warnings and great concern on the part of geologists for a number of years that due to the tectonic plates in that part of the world rubbing up against each other, that something big like this was going to happen sooner or later. But I mean, knowing that, we're being told by scientists that there's an X% chance of a big one happening this year, next year, within the next 5 years. I mean, that's all well and good, but in terms of governments, any government taking effective action to try to mitigate the damage from a 7.8 or 9 or 8 plus earthquake, I mean, that's just uncharted territory. So unfortunately for Nepal, so much of the country is in an incredibly dangerous fault zone, and it's just very difficult to see that level of devastation and destruction. And I've been pretty much glued to my laptop since it happened. And as I was mentioning before perhaps we got cut off, it's caused me to ponder how is it that 22 hours before the big one hit, I was able to get out. Of course, nobody had any clue that it was about to happen, but whether it was divine providence or karma or just simply random chance, it's I made friends there and got to know some of the staff. The little hotel I was staying with in near the Tamil area, which is kind of the backpackers haven and mecca for young people that come from all over the world, and it's just stunningly sad and very, very upsetting to see what's happened there.
Well, we have some photographs you sent us. I don't know if we're ready to show them, and you won't be able to see them because you're on voice only, but maybe I can describe them to you and you can tell me about them.
Actually, I'm watching you right now via the live stream on your website.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. Okay, happy to hear that. We have a two-way street. So here's some photos. If you can see this one, why don't you help us understand them?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay. So what you're looking at now, what we're looking at is Durbar Square. Durbar Square is structures going back several hundreds of years, and it's definitely one of the more special places for pilgrims to come from all over, not just in Kathmandu and from overseas, but also from Nepal to do various offerings and pilgrimages there. So what we're looking at there is the way it used to look prior to this past Saturday.
Okay, next one. Okay, what is this one, Marco?
Well, again, I'm waiting for it to the delay to show the next image. I imagine it's a photo of that I sent you, which is looking at that same square, yes, from more or less the same vantage point of the most important and kind of the most venerable temple there, which was just absolutely leveled by the earthquake. So now you see it, now you don't, and that's just a very small one representation of the destruction that's taken place, not just, of course, in Kathmandu, which is become more and more densely populated, but across Nepal. I was looking at some helicopter photos yesterday from Nepal Air Force, and it was just showing they were going across various villages, showing scenes of just piles of rubble where people's homes and people's lives used to be. That image that I'm seeing now is the most important and biggest Tibetan Buddhist stupa in Kathmandu is a place called Bodhnath, and I was just there on Thursday. In fact, a beautiful, beautiful day. There's a lot of really nasty air pollution in the Kathmandu Valley. But that particular day, last Thursday, was blue sky, clear sky, just gorgeous. Had lunch on top of a third floor, a rooftop terrace cafe overlooking the stupa. And while the stupa itself was relatively unscathed, buildings collapsed, as you can see there in the photo with that monkey, the monkeys can be fairly ubiquitous there in different places of Kathmandu. Around the Bodhnath stupa, buildings collapsed, people died, and again, really striking to have been someplace like that essentially hours before life changed dramatically for so many people there.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we got the flavor of that. What it suggests to me, though, Marco, is that, this kind of thing could happen anywhere. And of course you get great damage, but you're also, immediately struck with the difficulty that the Nepalese are going to have to rebuild their society. In Nepal, Kathmandu is by far the largest city, and most things happen in Kathmandu, not in the, in the villages around and the towns. And it's been pretty much destroyed, and it'll be a long time before they get their civilization together, their society together again. And it'll be a lot of work by people from the outside because they don't have the resources inside. One of the interesting things about Nepal is the level of health care. They don't have a lot of doctors. And every year, the Aloha Medical Mission under Dr. Brad Wong goes over there. They go to a town called Dankuda, and they do surgery for people who would never otherwise be able to get corrective surgery on anything. And that's what you need to get medical care in Nepal. And I'm sure that their systems now are stretched to the limit, and they're going to have to rely on help from the outside. And I hope that help comes soon for them. But it shows it shows you how this kind of devastation can stop a given society, and that's when the real fatalities happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fundamental questions and priorities of water, food, shelter, sanitation. Those and health care, of course, for people who are injured. I mean, those are the big five, obviously. And there is one rather small airport in Kathmandu with a single runway and limited tarmac space. And from what I understand, it's probably something of a bottleneck, as you've got the Americans, Indians, Chinese, Israelis, and other countries who are ready with their 747s, their C-5 cargo planes, to bring equipment and supplies in. It's a choreography of planes in, planes out, unloading stuff and getting them out of the airport to where they're needed. So, yeah, I mean, it just boggles the mind. I mean, people train to do this stuff in terms of disaster relief, but I mean, you've got all these different countries and bring their dogs.
Well, fast forward to Phnom Penh. What's the comparison that you found, structurally and culturally between Kathmandu and Phnom Penh?
I mean, they're two entirely different cultures, Jay. The Cambodians are if I'm not mistaken, Indo-Polynesian in origin, and very different than the Nepalese. Cambodia is a more or less flatter country compared to mountainous Nepal. They both suffered through years of war, which, of course, the Indochina War between first the French and then the Americans, the Vietnam conflict from roughly 64 to 74, where Cambodia was involved a number of years as well during that conflict, and then of course the nightmare of the Khmer Rouge from 75 to 1979, with up to 2 million people essentially slaughtered by Pol Pot and his fanatical back to year zero Communist Party. So, one thing that we have to appreciate, I think, in the U.S. is that for all the political brouhaha that we have of people not getting along, for the most part, we're not killing each other or haven't been for a century or more, whereas parts of the world here. It's just a generation or two ago where there was horrific suffering and killing between indigenous forces. I mean, it's a violent part of the world here, but over the past decades, both Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos have become much more, shall we say, pacified, and that there's not open warfare going on here, which is a very good thing.
So, how are the creature comforts in Phnom Penh? Are you in a comfortable hotel? Is the food any good? What's it like?
Well, I'm a friend of mine, Jay, so we haven't really been out all that much, but just driving around from the airport yesterday. I mean, this is a big and bustling, dusty city, and one thing that I'm really become acutely aware of since I've been on my Asia walkabout this past month is the fact that air pollution in Asia, especially South Asia, as in the Indian continent, and also Southeast Asia, these are amongst some of the worst air polluted cities on the planet. It wasn't too long ago when I was teaching my students a politics of energy class that 16 out of the top or worst polluted right now. They are all in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and going into the Middle East, from New Delhi to cities in Iran, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and sadly, there is not even an air quality monitoring station that I could find here in Phnom Penh. You know, whether that's the government not interested in wanting that public information to be public or not bothering to spend the money, I don't know. But I mean, that is, it's not just an academic question. The millions and millions of people who live in these cities who are having to deal with just god-awful air pollution. And a lot of that, of course, is due to power generation, but also, perhaps more so, due to motor vehicles. And more people are driving their tuk-tuks, which are those ubiquitous three-wheelers in the developing world, and motorcycles, motor and diesel trucks, and personal vehicles. So it's air pollution is a very big thing in so much of the developing world.
What about clean energy? Do you see signs of solar?
Not a whole lot in terms of grid-type solar. Southeast Asia, going from Thailand to Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, are in the infancy stage in terms of PV development. There is certainly PV going on in terms of village electrification on relatively small scales, from what I understand. But as far as grid-type PV, it is still a, shall we say, vastly underdeveloped.
Well, shifting on that topic, on energy, to the state of Hawaii, you've been following at least some of the events that have been taking place here. And I'd like to discuss with you at least a couple of them. One is we've had, we talked last time about this resolution, I guess Chris Lee put in, setting out parameters for the PUC to follow in ruling on the NextEra application to buy Hawaiian Electric. Are you aware of any developments on that? It was a resolution only. It's not necessarily binding, although I'm sure the PUC, they are, concerned about being told what to do. But is it passed? Have you heard any more? We're entering here the final week of the session. So what have you heard, if anything?
Well, I have to believe, like you said, Jay, that the commissioners are aware of things like that. How can they not be when it's something along the lines of a resolution from either body, the House or the Senate? And I don't know of any new news since we spoke last on this, but to me it's more of an example of a body, in this case the House, that really doesn't have much of a concrete role in the determination of whether the HEI NextEra buyout acquisition merger is going to happen. They don't have a concrete role in yay or nay. I mean, that fundamentally is going to be decided by the PUC commissioners with strong input from the Jeff Ono and Consumer Advocate. So I think it's more symbolic than substantive, but it gives an indication as to the depth and breadth of the concerns that the House has regarding this proposed merger.
Yeah. Well, but as we discussed last time, it seems really premature, if not inappropriate, for the legislature to tell one of its quasi-judicial agencies, which I believe was established by the Constitution, the state constitution, what to think, what to do, how to conduct its own examination of an important issue. It sounds unprecedented to me, and I wonder where all that goes in terms of its effect and also how the parties feel about it. They must be wondering, too, whether this is something the legislature can legally do in the first place.
Yeah, I just don't see that the legislature really has again, a concrete role in the determination of this decision ultimately, but I can understand their desire and their frustration about seemingly being somewhat on the sidelines and not having a more direct role for the people's body. So I get it, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to change how the game plays out much.
I hope not. I mean, I think PUC should make its own mind up about this, you know, it's very clear reading that what's about a dozen pages of, I don't want to call it suggestions, but expectations about what the PUC is going to do. It's very clear that the drafters of that resolution don't like the deal, and if you say that reflects the you know, the public feeling. And I guess if that's true, if it does reflect the public feeling, then you would have to assume the public doesn't like the deal. And this is becoming a greater and greater concern, because really there's been, in my observation, no significant reason, you know, to squash the deal even before the deal is legitimately being, you know, considered by the PUC. I mean, after all, the document requests have only started. Presumably they haven't gotten to any final analysis on this, and yet the public, through the legislature, is essentially telling them what to do. I'm not sure how they should feel about that. By the way, we're having them both on our show this Thursday. That is Alan Oshima of Hawaiian Electric and Eric Gleason of NextEra. We'll be able to discuss this with them. But, you know, what's your thought about that? I mean, you can say that there's concern. You can say the legislature has concern, which presumably it got from its constituents. But are those concerns different than the concerns that the PUC would consider anyway? Are those concerns so earth-shattering that they would turn this all against the deal?
I mean, the PUC commissioners and their staffs are there to sift through all the concerns, all the questions, all the data, all the plans, and propose benefits, and try to make sense of this voluminous amount of bits and pieces to try to come up with a decision as to yay or nay. And as I think I've said before, I would find it to be incredible, not believable, that they would sign off on this merger if they are inclined to believe that it is in the public interest of the people of Hawaii to move forward. I would find it incredible that they would sign off on it without significant modifications and stipulations. And that's
I think that's clear. The only question is what are the two questions? What are the conditions going to be? And the second question is whether NextEra will tolerate them. But let's take a short break. Marco Mangelsdorf of ProVision Solar in Hilo. He's He's on travel. He's in Phnom Penh, and we are connecting with him by Skype, audio Skype, here on Marco and Me. We're talking now about what has been happening here in Hawaii in his absence in energy. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Paul Jackson, better known as PJ, and my local interest is in sports. I have my own sports radio show at KWAI AM 1080 that you can stream live. I also have my own website, pjsportsradio.com. We have live guests in studio, and we talk about discussions and topics that everyone wants to know locally here on the islands. We cover everything from surfing to basketball to whatever's going on locally, sports-wise. We try to do our best and cover the topics in depth as much as we can. Once again, thank you for joining PJ here on Hawaii Sports Update. Mahalo.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Marco Mangelsdorf. He joins us by Skype from Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And we're here talking just as we do, Marco and me, largely about energy. And there are some other bills and moves in the legislature that are worth discussing. Well, this one, the first one I want to mention, not in the legislature, is the consumer advocates' interrogatories, I guess you'd call it, to flesh out the background of some of the statements that were submitted to the PUC by, I guess, Hawaiian Electric, or maybe more likely NextEra, about what they plan to do. And the consumer advocate went into some detail in asking them for, what they really meant by these various statements, assuring that service would be better, that technology would be better, resources would be enhanced, and so forth. All these good things that were going to happen as a result of the merger. What do you get from that and from the tone of the questions that Jeff Ono has propounded to NextEra?
Well, it seems to me that the consumer advocate is doing exactly what the consumer advocate needs to do in a case like this, which is you have the testimonies of a number of individuals from HEI, HECO, and from NextEra that were submitted by the HEI and NextEra attorneys, and the consumer advocate is essentially asking for substantiation. Okay, you're making claims A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Essentially, show us the evidence to support and substantiate these claims. So I think Jeff Ono is doing exactly, in this case, what he needs to do to essentially say, okay, you're saying all these things, how things are going to be better in so many tangible ways, we'll prove it. Show me the beef. It goes back to, was it 1984 election, Democratic primary with Walter Mondale being challenged by Gary Hart and others. And remember that, show me the beef. Show me the beef. I think actually it was Burger King, if I'm not mistaken. We had this monstrously huge bun, and then you take the top of the bun open, and the patty was infinitesimally small. So kind of along those lines, the consumer advocate is saying, well, show me the beef, or in case you're a vegetarian, show me the tofu, substantiate your claims.
Well, can you get anything out of his current thinking from those questions? Struck me there were a lot of questions. Maybe there was some skepticism you could read into that. Maybe some incipient objection to the deal. What did you find in there looking at it?
I don't think I'm going to go to that level of tea reading, Jay, in terms of visions. I just think he and his office are doing their best to fiduciary responsibility to try to push the parties, the applicants, to provide the substance behind the claims, and okay. I think that's a very legitimate thing for Mr. Owner to do.
What about HIEC, your co-op for the Big Island? I take it you have the right to ask questions too, and I'm wondering whether you, in fact, asked any questions, and whether what is happening, at least as far as you're concerned.
Now, good question, Jay. Good question. We are still in the pondering and evaluation mode in terms of the type of IRs, information requests, that we are going to be posing. We will most likely be posing a number of them. It's not going to happen this week, but it will be happening certainly before this particular round closes. So I'm not going to tip our hand right now in terms of the approach we're going to take, but we will be putting chips on the table.
Are you, I guess it's clear that you have an opportunity to ask questions of the two parties to the transaction. Do you have, I'm just wondering, do you have the opportunity to ask questions of the other interveners, or is that not permitted?
No, interesting you should bring that up, because Henry Curtis of Life of the Land, specifically, I think it was April 17th document, if I'm not mistaken, and he filed a motion in this docket to be able to pose questions to other interveners on the docket, and that motion was declined, was refused, rejected by the commission, essentially saying, no, we are not going to permit that to happen. We have to keep this on the straight and narrow in terms of its focus, and it ain't going to happen. So that's the answer to that. It's not going to happen.
Well, that sounds like a correct decision to me. Otherwise, you have what is called in the parlance a circus. But why this is happening, these information requests and all the like, am I right to say that there's no other process going on vis-a-vis the request for approval? In other words, it's linear. First, we get through the information requests, and then we get to the actual analysis. Am I right?
That is my understanding, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, let's look at some of the statutes that have been, or the bills that have been put into ledge, which are still alive and which are presumably in conference this very week. One of them is a bill for community solar, and I guess that was a Chris Lee bill, Representative Chris Lee. What's that called?
Jay, that's Mike Gabbard's baby. That's something that he has been very much supportive of. Yeah.
Mike Gabbard, Senator Mike Gabbard of the Senate. So what does that call for?
Well, it's something that has happened in a number of parts of the mainland with, from what I understand, a reasonable to great degree of success, where you are giving folks who don't have roof space, such as, let's say, a condo owner or apartment owner, someone who is not able to put a photovoltaic system up on their roof for their direct benefit and enjoyment, they would, through community solar, be able to essentially, if I understand correctly, be able to be an investor and or accrue the benefits of a photovoltaic system, which would not be on their roof, but be on someone else's roof or on the ground, that would essentially PV array that would be owned by interested members of the community. So I know Mike has been very, very excited and supportive of this particular concept, and it came very close to getting at a conference last session before it essentially ran out of time by an hour or two, if I understand correctly, and did not make it to Abercrombie's desk. But I know Mike is working very, very hard to try to make that happen this session. So, he's pretty much till it's over, until the conference closes. But I know he's very hopeful to be able to get that across the finish line this time.
One thing is, this would bring the benefits of solar to a lot of people that, from a practical point of view, can't get the benefits of solar now, and they're not proximate solar anyway. But another thing that comes to mind, though, is that this would, am I right? This would cut out the utility. Utility would not be in between the community solar facility and the users of the electrical energy generated by the community solar facility. Am I right?
I think so, but I mean, the part of the community solar proposed, at least the current version that I read yesterday, there would be a special a community solar tariff established by the PUC. And you're right, I think, Jay. I don't believe that the utility company would have a role in that, other than being responsible through, obviously, its transmission and distribution system, from being able to provide solar power produced in Eva Plain, for example, to someone who lives in Kahala, just to take one example.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it would serve the community, but not the larger community, only the smaller community that was directly involved in the community solar facility, rather than just put it into the system in general. Very interesting. I mean, this is kind of a partial wheeling doctrine, isn't it? I mean, you remember wheeling, where you can sell power to, well, anyone. You can be your own utility without having to become a utility for purposes of the PUC. I think in Texas, that's the law. No, but this would be a kind of partial wheeling doctrine, wouldn't it?
That's I think, a reasonable conclusion. I was thinking the same thing.
No. Oh, interesting. That would be a big change, I think, for a lot of people, especially in a state where condominiums are so ubiquitous. The other one is this bill that calls for a new schedule for renewable portfolio standards, and indeed it calls for 100% clean energy by the year 2050. Somehow this is related to the fact that only a few months ago, I don't know if it was all that public at the time, but the original Hawaii Clean Energy Agreement was canceled. Of course, that was reported by PBN maybe 2 weeks ago, that it was canceled. And now the parties were getting about, creating Clean Energy Initiative number 2. What I find interesting is that the agreement that was made in 2008 was canceled by agreement of the parties, not by the legislature. Presumably that would be replaced by another agreement by the same parties. But that didn't happen, or not to my knowledge anyway. And now what we find is the legislature is stepping in to set up its RPS standards and goals over time. Can you make some sense out of that for us?
Well, I mean, it's not unique to Hawaii, of course. The legislature, state legislature gets involved in 1% renewable portfolio standards. So my hit is that these are much more aspirational in nature than concrete, and I'm a firm believer that the farther out you get in prognostications as far as, well, let's hit 100% in 35 years, the more fanciful and feel-good it is, rather than having a tangible, practical benefit. And kind of like the ancient Polynesian mariners before GPS and other sophisticated equipment. I mean, when they were traveling thousands of miles across the ocean, they were reliant upon the stars when they could see them to be able to chart their course. So the stars, of course, very important in being able to get to where you wanted to go, but you knew darn well that you were never going to reach them. So to some extent, that's kind of the way I see these RPS goals.
Well, Marco, I wonder if I could ask you one last question. And there you are, you've been traveling to faraway places and presumably thinking and reading about these issues in Hawaii while you're gone, and having the clarity of distance, if you will. And I wonder if you have a thought about exactly where we are these days. The Clean Energy Initiative was canceled. This new bill is largely aspirational. The legislature seems to be involved in things that we wouldn't have expected. The Next Era thing is only the very beginning of its process. Has a year to go, or more than a year to go. And there's been no significant, that I can see, correct me if you see otherwise, no significant developments since the Ige administration took office in clean energy. So where are we? Can you give us a word or two on where you think we are and where we're going here in clean energy?
Well, I keep on going back to what we call the T word, Jay, the T word being turbulence in general. And it's a very rich time, but it's also kind of a disconcerting time. I mean, to go from the perhaps more disconcerting to less disconcerting. In terms of transportation, as I've said on a number of occasions, I'm feeling, and I felt quite pessimistic and kind of downcast about how incredibly dependent, to the tune of 99-point-something% the state is on liquid fossil fuels for transportation, both ground and, of course, inter-island. And I just don't see that changing to the benefit anytime soon. I mean, it's great that Toyota is going to be introducing their first production line fuel cell vehicle, the Mirai, in only 3 states, and Hawaii is going to be one of them, I believe, starting next year. So, that's great news. But transportation is just a real bugger, and it's hard to find an optimistic scenario, realistic optimistic scenario about that changing anytime in the near term. And power generation, I think, is more optimistic, and we certainly have made progress over the past years and decades. But we're seeing real challenges in terms of today's grids across the state being able to accommodate more and more distributed generation PV. And I'm surprised and I'm concerned that it was only January 20th that HECO announced that they were willing to go from 120% of daytime minimum load in equivalent PV generation to 250% of daytime minimum load in equivalent PV generation back on January 20th. Well, now we're at the end of April, so approximately that's February, March, April, 3+ months, and there are already a surprisingly high number of circuits that on Oahu that have already hit 250+% in a handful of months. So I really question to what extent and how much further these grids can go in accommodating people's rooftop PV. So, batteries, Elon Musk and Solar City have announced that they've got something, that they're going to roll out very soon in terms of what sounds to be lithium-ion battery packs for people's homes. But I mean, and be able to last, a good long time. So I don't know. To me, it just continues to be really quite turbulent. And I'm just reading a piece right now from Dwayne Shimagawa where Alan Oshima was quoted as saying that he hopes and expects that the deal is going to be done within a year with this merger deal. And I don't know if that's going to happen as far as his timeline goes. So it's just so much is up in the air, Jay. More so than any other time I've been.
I agree. It's up in the air. Marco, we've got to close up. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us, even from as far away as Phnom Penh. And hopefully we can catch up with you before you come back in a week or two, and check up on other events that have taken place both where you are and where we are, because it's all the same. It's one great big flat world, one global village. Thank you so much, Marco Mangelsdorf.
Always my great pleasure, Jay. Always my great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Aloha.